So the heart and soul of Desert Pencil is teaching people skills and methodologies and points of view to increase their income and their wealth. And so we do a lot of analysis, play with the numbers, all that kind of thing. Very, very important stuff. But another thing that people do, especially to increase their income, is selling. And I've always said we're all selling all the time. The problem is a lot of people have never learned really even the basic skill sets that they need to sell effectively. And that's what we talked about in today's webinar. So the webinar opened with an exercise that I do in some of the courses simply called Sell Me the Pen. So what is that? Well, it's an exercise where I ask the students to do their best to pitch me and sell me their pen in 30 seconds to 60 seconds. So in this webinar, I'm going to jump you in. We've already done that. And now we're going to unpack some of it. I'm going to offer a handful of what I think are very important basic selling skills that everybody can use. So I want to make certain points that, again, I say bring pen and paper to this thing so you can write them down, okay? So the first thing I want you to write down is 2 words, and the words are doctor, lawyer. And I'll be brief about this part of my sermon today. I know I've said this before. But the doctor and lawyer is an analogy about how you assess a situation and how you approach a situation. Now, I'm not here to bash on lawyers. And one time we had a lawyer, Roger, was in Florida. I didn't know he was a lawyer. But I'm not here to bash on lawyers. I'm not here to praise lawyers. It's nothing like that. This is just, it's an analogy. It's a way to draw a difference, okay? So when a lawyer approaches a situation, a lawyer is an advocate. A lawyer says, I want you to do this thing. I want you to believe this thing. I want you to come to this conclusion, okay? So to borrow an analogy from the great Stephen Covey, lawyers follow the euphemism of begin with the end in mind. So they know this is what I want the judge to believe or the jury to believe or my counterpart to believe, whatever it is, and they work backwards to build their case, okay? That's how a lawyer approaches things. A doctor does it completely the opposite. A doctor says, let me assess your situation first. Let me ask you some questions. Let me poke at you. Does this hurt? Does that hurt? Let's run some tests. They gather information through inquiry, and then they make their diagnosis. Do you see the difference? Okay. Everybody was a lawyer until we got to Matthew. Did you notice that? He was the first one who actually tried to assess my situation. So you can put it as number 1 or number 2 or number 5 or whatever, but somewhere on your list, you have to put in your pitch assessing the situation, assessing the customer's needs. Why is the customer here? Okay, and that leads me to the second point that I want to make, which is going to be it'll be 2 or 3 of these points on this next level. So one of them is you have to look for people's problems. Now, again, this is kind of back to the Basics Friday. We forget this, okay, and we need to remember this. Our reason for being in business is to solve a problem that the customer cannot solve on their own, period. That's why you're there. So the key word in that phrase is not solve. The key word is problem. So you have to assess their situation and find their problem, okay? There's a reason that I walked into the pen store, okay? Now, the inexperienced people would say, oh, it's because you need a pen. The experienced person would say, let me find out what your trouble is and how I can help you, okay? Now, this is very counterintuitive to a lot of people, but it's so important. You must begin your assessment with probing for what is the person's problem. Okay, and I said there were a couple of other parallel points here. Here's the next one. One of the things that you're selling at the beginning of the pitch is the customer's pain if they don't buy your solution. You are selling the customer's pain if they don't buy your solution. So I'm just going to make this up. Let's say I walk into the pen store, and the problem I'm having is every time I sign a contract, the ink runs out. Okay, I'm just making this up, but it's a problem, okay? So an effective pitcher, an effective salesperson, is going to key in on that and begin to shape the discussion this way. Well, Joe, if you don't get a better pen, look at all the business you're going to lose. Look at all the money you're going to lose. Look at what a fool everybody's going to think you are, or whatever it is. The point of focusing on people's pain is as follows. Pain is an emotion that people feel. Now, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. Everybody here, everybody who's not here, everybody who is a human being will do more to avoid pain than they will to seek pleasure. We're all wired that way. It's core. It's primal. We do more to avoid pain than we do to seek pleasure. And again, this is very counterintuitive for inexperienced people because they go, oh, no, we've got to sell the benefit. And that's important. Benefits are huge. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is anchoring an emotion for the person you're pitching to that look at how horrible your life is going to end up if you don't buy my solution. Okay? So find their pain. Tell them, they have no option without you, basically, based on the pain. And the third thing in this second tier is always sell the future. People forget about this too. What you're selling is a future emotional tense, a future emotional state. Joe, can you imagine how much more relieved you're going to be, how much happier you're going to be a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, feeling confident that you know that every time you pull out a pen, it's going to work? And that sounds like a stupid little thing. But if I walk into you and go, hey, my problem is my pen runs dry every time I sign an important contract, and you can tell me how I don't have to worry about that anymore, that you're going to keep me safe, that you're going to help me prosper, feeling. Those are the things that are going to make me fall in love with you. And you want me to fall in love with you. That's a metaphor, by the way. But you get my point, okay?
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
I think it's also the word imagine that you use.
Sure.
So people start imagining themselves
Yep.
in this better situation. Very
Yep.
powerful.
So imagine is, it's a paintbrush for a word picture. I mean, helping people to paint word pictures for visual people, it's a very powerful rapport building skill. Excuse me. And so imagine is just another one of those words that, lets you do that. Absolutely. Okay. So before I move forward, I want us to go back and do just a real cursory review of this. Okay. You've got to be searching for people's problem. You have to sell them, number one, on how their life is going to be a lot worse without you than with you. Then the second part is selling the future tense of their prosperity, success, good feelings, all that kind of thing. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention about this is when these moments of magic between two people occur, they occur very quickly. This is not something that takes 3 hours to do. If you do it right, it takes like less than a minute. Okay? But you have to follow a sequence. You got to look for the pain. You got to anchor the pain. And you got to show them why you're the medicine. That's essentially what it is. Okay? Once you get through those steps, the next effective part of pitching is the close. Okay? But there's a small step before the close that I think everybody needs to be mindful of, and that is what I call the trial close. Now, this was just a make-believe. I give you 2.5 minutes to prep basic exercise, okay? Half of you went through your pitch and immediately tried to close on me. And I would argue this. That's probably how you do it outside of the dumb little exercise too, because that's what you know. What I would interject between the end of your pitch and the beginning of your close is the trial close, okay? So what a trial close does is it asks for a small piece of commitment. All right. So you might say, and it's some people call it an assumptive close. So you might do something like this. Well, you know, Joe, we're having a sale right now on the pens, and they're $1 a piece. But if you buy 6, I can give you 4 for free. So what works better for you? Do you like this one, or do you want to take advantage of our discount? That's a trial close. Okay, so if I say, I just need 1, I'm giving you permission to go to the close. If I say, wow, 4 for free? That sounds awesome. I've given you permission to take me to the close. I've just learned over the years, this dumb little thing called a trial close, it's a big thing. And many of us have been buying something at some point in our lives, and the salesman is just like the fucking talking hand, right? And you're just checked out. You're just like, when is this windbag going to shut up? And how can I get out of here politely? You know what I'm saying? We've all been that buyer, okay? That pitcher, that salesperson was not using the trial close. They were not checking in to see if we're still with them or not. It's an important point. And if you trial close effectively, then closing is the natural next step. If you trial close effectively, the prospect wants you to close. They want you to tell them this is what's next. Okay, so if I take this whole discussion and I put it in a package called You Are a Realtor Pitching a Listing, once you do the trial close, the next thing you do is you give them the paperwork, give them the pen and say, I need your authorization here so we can get to work. That's a close. Okay? But my argument is don't close until you've been given permission to do it. I just think it's a better way. All right? Now, 2 other little things here, but I think they're big things. So one of them is learning how to handle an objection. All right? So what if I say no? What are you going to do? Okay? Now, in my course, Real Negotiation, I go through a whole 7-step thing. I don't have time to do that today. But let me give you just a couple of highlights. Okay? When someone gives you an objection, the first thing you need to do, well, let me rephrase that. The first thing you don't want to do is to disagree with them. So let's just put us back in the pen selling store, Chris's Pen Emporium. And I'm standing there, and Chris says, you know, we've got these pens for sale. And he gets it, but he's like, do you want one? I'm like, no, I think they're too expensive. So what you don't want to do is, are you crazy? These are the cheapest pens in town. You don't want to.
Kind of expensive.
You don't. Well, you don't want to do that, right? Okay, so go ahead, Chris. What would you say? What would you say if I had a price objection?
Like that. This isn't just an ordinary pen. Advanced features and benefits and so on.
Okay, so what you would do is take my
Maybe the
objection.
question is, why do you think it's why do you think it's expensive?
Well, that's part of it. Okay, if I've already told you it's too expensive, so that's the thing. So the question in handling objection primarily is this: is it what I call a real objection, or is it a false objection? And here's an easy analogy of that. Has anybody here ever worked with a first-time home buyer? Okay, so what's their problem? Their problem is they're afraid. They haven't done this before. And usually when people are afraid or don't understand something, they're most likely to say no and not yes, even if it is going to make their life better. It's because they don't understand. Okay. All right. So number one, don't disagree. Number two, you want to isolate the objection. The thing about handling objections is you can only handle objections one at a time. Okay, so you have to isolate the objection. So I say something like this, if I was Chris. Okay, Joe, I get it. You think it's too expensive. Is it just the price, or is there anything else you're concerned about? See, that's isolating an objection. And if I say, no, it's just the price, then I might say something like this. Okay, well, if we can figure out the price, do you think you'd want to buy a pen? That's a trial closed too. That's an assumption. Okay. What's really difficult with objections is moving people out of their feelings and into their thoughts, because you have to communicate as human beings to get through this. And some people have a very hard time going from here to here. Like they get it, but they get it in terms of feeling, but they can't get it into their head to make their mouth go to tell you what they're thinking or feeling at the time. Some people are like that. Okay. Now, as I said, I don't have time to go through the whole model, but those are a couple of important things to remember about handling objections. Okay. Don't disagree and isolate the objection. And once you've isolated it, ask for permission. If we can resolve this objection in a way that works for you, would you be willing to proceed? Okay, so you have to have a tool or a mindset to be able to handle objections, okay? And the last thing that I have on my list for today, and you guys are welcome to add to it for sure, but the last thing I have is this: follow up. Pitching is integral to selling, whether it's a product, service, idea, whatever. And sometimes people are going to say no for a lot of reasons that may have nothing to do with you or your product or service. Maybe it's just the wrong time. So I have one customer in one of my businesses, and I pitched them for probably 18 months. And after the first couple times we talked on the phone, it was just follow up, follow up, follow up. Once a month I call, send an email, whatever. Hey, just checking in. Hey, can we help anything? No, we're good. Okay, see ya. 30 or 45 days later. Hey, it's me again, just checking in, blah, blah, blah. Finally, on the 18th month, they took the bait. That customer buys $100,000 a year worth of stuff from me to this day. They've been a customer for about 10 years. Okay, so that's $1 million that I made off of one customer, gross. And I swear to you, the only reason, well, not the only reason, but the big reason is because I was diligent in my follow-up. They just weren't ready.
Joe,
Go ahead.
can I kind of
Yeah.
follow up on that a
Please.
little bit?
Yeah.
I just read an article last night that Costco has gas, but originally the CEO of Costco, when the idea was brought up to him, turned it down, and a little team of other executives in Kirkland or in Costco who really thought it was a good idea, pitched him 8 times.
Yeah.
And he finally agreed on the 8th time, and he now acknowledges that he was wrong. They should have done it all along because their gas is a big draw for them.
It is. It is. No, that's a great story. And you know what? There are stories like that in the last 200 years of business history. You read them everywhere. Famously, Lincoln lost about everything he ever tried until he ran for senator and then president,
Sure.
So there's a lot of things at that. Now, your level of follow-up, I think, is also a business decision. Okay, this customer I was telling you about, my other business, they're a whale. They've got 5 locations. I want them as a customer. They are worth that effort, which really wasn't much, but they're worth it, putting me on their calendar, just checking in again, seeing how you doing, that kind of thing. The world is very dynamic, as we've seen last month. The world changes all the time. So you have to change with it. And I think that following up is just one of those little things that makes a big difference. Okay. And I also offer that this way. If you're not successful in your first pitch, try not to be super discouraged. Okay. I mean, sometimes, and sometimes it's just not the right match, as we all know. But this follow-up thing, it's a big deal. It's huge.